It's one of the most memorable wins in professional wrestling history. Today we're covering No Way Out 2004 on Something to Wrestle After. Stay tuned.
You're tuned in to AfterBuzz TV, the ESPN of TV talk. Now, let the buzz begin.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Something to Wrestle After. My name is Christy Olsen, and this is the show for all you fans who love Something to Wrestle with Bruce Pritchard to come and hang out after you've listened to their show. We cover all the juicy reveals, all the fan reactions, let you guys know what you think. And basically, we just have a ton of fun. And by we, I mean myself and these gentlemen sitting right here at the table with me. Glad to have you back, Mr. Flobo Boyce, comedian and host of the Raw After Show.
That's true, but I got 2 B's, man.
I love it!
Right.
Have you been practicing that for days?
I've been trying it for a day or two, yeah.
It was good. It was
Thanks.
good. Well, let's see what this guy has to say. I call him the encyclopedia of professional wrestling. You know him as George Hermosa.
That's me. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me here, too.
You're very welcome. Oh, yeah, we haven't had you on this panel
Not
before.
on this one.
Welcome.
And I'm excited, as you can tell by my voice.
Yeah, but I think the
excited.
AfterBuzz TV fans out there are quite familiar with you, and we do appreciate all of you guys tuning in with us live. We are live at 7 p.m. Eastern on Sunday nights. A ton of you are rolling already in the chat, and I just have to repeat this sentiment from AJ0314, who pointed out that this is a podcast about a pay-per-view during a pay-per-view. That's right. WWE Elimination Chamber, I think, is going down right about now, so I'm sure you guys are watching, but we appreciate you tuning in to us as well. Make sure you hit that thumbs up button and subscribe. We're on Apple Podcasts too, and leave us a comment. We will always shout you out.
Hey.
Hey, I like that. I like that. Well, if they're interested in knowing about all the programming we got going down here at AfterBuzz TV, Flobo, you got a little message for our fans. Is that right?
Hey, guys, before we move on to our first topic, I just wanted to say thank you for making us the ESPN of TV talk. But for us to continue, we could use your help. If you're on YouTube right now, hit that thumbs up button and then subscribe. And if you're on iTunes, please give us a 5-star rating. But no matter where you are, leave us a comment so you can get involved in that conversation. 5 stars, 5 stars, 5 stars, 5 stars, 5 stars.
Yes.
Being a part of AfterBuzz TV has meant so much for all of us, and we truly appreciate you supporting us and doing what we love. So don't forget to tell all your friends and some of your haters, and keep enjoying our shows.
I love that. I love that. You know, we cover 83 Weeks with Eric Bischoff as well. We're on his channel, and we always have him calling in, and you never know who we're going to get to be calling in and offering their insight on this little show, too. And on that note, let's jump right into it. As per usual, we got all the lead-up stuff to this big pay-per-view featuring, as I said before, one of the most memorable wins in professional wrestling history. We are, of course, talking about Eddie Guerrero going home with the championship that night. Were you really excited to hear about No Way Out and kind of get the real behind-the-scenes scoop from Bruce Pritchard himself on this one?
Absolutely. This was one of those shows where I was like, I can't wait till they cover this show. Like 15 years pretty much to the day. It kind of fell on the day. So yeah, I couldn't wait for them to cover the show.
Yeah, I enjoyed the pay-per-view as a kid, or younger. I wasn't a kid, but as much younger, it was okay enough. But seeing it with a context now, you're watching the show, it was magic that night for sure.
It was, and there's a lot going on behind the scenes leading up to it. Of course, the what stood out to me at the beginning of this episode was all this talk about OVW, because we hear so much, and I've heard on some other podcasts a lot about the end of OVW, but this is sort of the beginning. This is Bruce telling us this is how it happened. Have you guys heard this story before?
Specifically,
That was Cornette's idea.
About which one?
About OVW?
I'm sure it was Cornette's idea. I mean, I didn't know it was specifically him, but I know he had a lot to do with OVW back then. He was really good friends with Nightmare Danny Davis back in the day. So they both had a big part in the developmental. And I heard Jim Cornette wasn't really big on like he liked being in the WWE, but like he only before that it was Smoky Mountain Wrestling that he ran. So I heard he kind of liked this kind of vibe and being part of the developing of talent.
Yeah, the background was totally helpful for me, understanding how Danny Davis was related into the founding of OVW and what it meant to the WWE for them. Right?
Yeah.
Or at this point, yeah.
Yeah, well, this gave some of the guys that were just sitting at home not doing a whole lot a place to go, and that makes me think of the WWE Performance Center now. We'd see a lot of the main roster guys who were injured pop in or who needed to get back into the ring, hanging out. There was this story that Conrad really pressed on about Tommy Dreamer being forced to work without his shirt on, and that this was supposed to be some kind of like punishment or humiliation to him to kick him in the butt and get him to lose some weight or something. Conrad really wanted this to be juicy, as I always do, but it just wasn't.
Yeah, I mean, they mentioned it. I mean, Tommy wrestled in a shirt for a very, very long time, despite the fact he was Dreamer, as Bruce mentioned. But I can imagine if that were true, that would be like scandalous for like 2 days.
I don't even think that's big of a deal. Like even it's not like getting a stink face with a jelly donut. You know, we all heard that story. Like that. I mean, compared to that, like working with a shirt off is like nothing.
Yeah.
And being forced to train with the women.
Oh no! God forbid. But again, maybe the women were different back then. Maybe it's like
Much different.
Yeah, they actually touched upon that, but they wanted more models and people who are fitness models and not necessarily athletes in that regard, right?
Yeah, we get this great story about Bobby and Latasha,
Right.
two Playboy models, shall we say, who sent their tapes in, which apparently at this time usually includes nudes. Pritchard was very open about that. He said, you know, we were looking for Playboy models. That's what these girls have done. That's what's in their portfolio, so that's what they sent us.
Yeah.
This was just hilarious, kind of start to finish, and reminds us that it was so different for women back in the day.
It really was.
It was, for
especially like now. Like, and it's funny because they just had like a tryout. Or did you see like the casting call?
No.
There was like a casting call at like Barney's Beanery in Burbank yesterday.
What?
Yeah, I don't know. It's just all. I think they were like it's like more Bunham Murray. Is that the?
Buna Murray,
Buna Murray, yeah.
who produces Total Divas.
Yeah, so I'm kind of curious. I mean, I know some local wrestlers that did go out to that. So I'm kind of curious, like the overall, like what was there more models? Like was it essentially a casting call for like a future season of Total Divas?
Oh, because no, I did read somewhere in a dirt sheet that they're doing something that is sort of like Tough Enough, but with all female talent, and that would make all of that what you just said make sense.
That does make sense, yeah. But the philosophy has changed. I mean, the idea of just sending in some of your news, Bruce, right? Sending your news and being called for a meeting is totally different to what's happening now with showing up at Performance Center, seeing your skills and fitness first, and that totally led to a better product, right? If you look
And
back.
just the idea that having those kind of photos out in the world now is seen as more of a negative thing.
Yeah, for sure. Family product. It's a family product.
It is a family product, and there was a couple of family guys there. We get some tidbits about Jack Tunney, Hulk Hogan, Chris Kanyon, The Rock, and let's focus a little bit on Jack Tunney. Is that someone who you guys really are interested in? Like, do you want to hear about Jack Tunney? Where you're like, yeah, Conrad, ask him what happened at the end. Was he bitter?
Not
No?
really.
I would say Jack Tunney was a blank slate for me. I mean, as a kid, he looked presidential to
Yeah.
the point. He looked like he was on the company.
Like
But
I was really upset when I found out he really wasn't the president of the WWF. You know, he was just a figure.
what do you mean it's not real? Like I felt the same way. But to hear him, I know that they had to. Bruce was more on the WWE side of how he was let go or ousted. As someone who's worked at the day job, I kind of fell for the guy. I mean, like you had this territory, you sided with the guy, you bring in someone who had different skills, but you can stay on, but you can still work with him, and him taking his dignity out the door. But it looked like he was bitter towards the end.
Yes, and understandably so, as you pointed out. Someone who is not bitter in the least bit, I know this because I interviewed him a couple years ago, we had him on Sean's show, is Zach Gowen.
Tenacious Z.
Yes, this is a great guy, and we heard some sentiments from Bruce. Bruce agreed that he's a great guy, but you know he was just so young at this time in WWE, and that he was getting a lot of opportunities very quickly, and we know response to that can always be mixed. Was this interesting?
I mean, it was just nothing new. Like I kind of heard about Zach Gowen not having the best reputation backstage back then, which is why he was essentially let go. I mean, essentially, if you guys remember, like his first program was with like Hulk Hogan and Roddy Piper.
Yeah.
Like you're so new in the business, you know, and your first thing you do is with Hogan and Piper, and it's like, yeah, I did, and I think he'll be the first to admit it too that he wasn't really mature enough back then to really, you know how to maybe treat well with others and whatnot. So I mean, I'm sure he's a great guy now, but he was the first to say. So I just wasn't really that much new.
Sure, I totally agree. It wasn't earth shattering, but when I was younger and watching Zach Gowen, he kind of came and went.
Yeah.
And putting in perspective now that they kept saying his age, like at 19, I didn't know what I wanted for dinner, right? And you're touring weeks and weeks with some of the wrestling legends, and people are saying, hey, do the trick that you do, which not really is a trick, but you know, you do have the prosthetic limb, so it could weigh on someone. Being someone to go from 0 to 100 real quick and having to balance all that, and people recognize you in airports and stuff and asking for autographs, and he was very, very young, you know?
Yeah, and he's still been out there the last few years kind of trying to do his thing, and he works with DDP Yoga.
Bang.
Right? Have either of you guys ever tried DDP Yoga?
No, have you?
I've tried
No.
it once.
I haven't.
It's
I think we
intense.
probably
I know
should.
Rosenberg has.
Oh, it's intense, you say?
Yeah, I did it through the YRG days when it first came out. The
Okay.
yoga for regular guys.
Yes.
It's effective, but I was like, oh, I'm not strong enough for this.
Well, maybe we can get some instruction from Zach at some point.
That'd be awesome.
But what was going down at this time in WWE has a lot to do, and where No Way Out went, has a lot to do with Goldberg. And essentially this new deal that we've heard about before. And Bruce set some things straight on the deal. And Goldberg didn't take it the way that it was supposed to be. They're offering him less days, which of course means less money, and he took exception to that. Not surprising.
Not surprising either. Like he's another guy that didn't really have the best reputation back then either.
Yeah.
I heard and I heard multiple people. He's a great guy like overall, but you put like the wrestling business around him, and he kind of tends to be a little like sour about it. I mean, I'm sure he's better now, but back then. Like, and I always kind of figure like he'd be gone after a year anyway, so maybe they just kind of like they said they offered him just maybe to be nice, knowing that he turned down anyways.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they did. To me, it's as a guy who was more in the WWE growing up. I'm from New York, so that the Federation was my local promotion. Seeing Goldberg come in as this force of nature and having him going out the next month at WrestleMania 20 in Madison Square Garden with such a whimper just felt like the total letdown. All your WWE friends would tell you, Goldberg's the man, bro. And towards it kind of felt that he wasn't totally into it. He really was like looking for that next chapter for himself.
Yeah, he was, which turned out pretty well for some other guys. His absence left some room for some newbies. And also, this piggybacks off of what we talked about last week. And they have to have a second Royal Rumble. This is a couple weeks before the No Way Out pay-per-view. They have a second Royal Rumble on SmackDown after Chris Benoit leaves the brand for Raw. Dun, dun, dun. What stood out to me in this talk was Bruce saying, like, oh, we had people who could work on SmackDown then. Like, SmackDown was the wrestling show back then. And isn't it essentially kind of considered the wrestling show now?
Still, I always thought of Raw being more of a sports entertainment show, and SmackDown being more of a wrestling show. And it's funny because like right now, I can't see AJ Styles on Raw. And it's just weird. It's like it's the same company, but it's just like it's presented totally differently. Like I can't see AJ coming out.
Styles got moved to Raw?
No, I'm saying I can't see it.
Oh,
like,
I was going to say, that would be shocking.
He's such a SmackDown fixture and just more, he's a wrestler, you know? Like I don't see AJ coming out every Monday and doing a promo, you know? It's just weird. That's like, that's the way it is, but it's the same exact company.
Right. They try not to emphasize that much with the shake-up branding, but when it was the draft, it was very clear that SmackDown talent was farmed. Like once they got the skills and their moveset and their reaction like established, it was like, all right, now come to Raw, we'll give you some storylines. And that was definitely the vibe you got, that we were watching SmackDown on Thursday and Friday. It's, I really love wrestling so much. I'll admit 2 more hours at the end of the week, you know?
Yeah. Well, this all had big consequences for WrestleMania, and that's sort of where we're working to. Of course, every time we're on the road to WrestleMania, it's all about that. And we get a little blurb too about Hulk Hogan, who they wanted to appear at Mania, and he was basically like, meh, no thanks. Does that make you feel some type of way about one Hulk Hogan?
Yeah, Hulk Hogan is one of those guys that I know that he is legendary. But ultimately, the WrestleMania 20 would not have been better or worse with an appearance of him.
Yeah.
But I do thought it was pretty cool to talk more about how their relationship comes and goes. Like these bitter rivals some days and best friends the other. Yeah. They're like star-crossed lovers, Mr. McMahon and Hulk Hogan are, you know?
Yeah, that was interesting. I've never heard their relationship described that way before. As Bruce directly said, love-hate.
Yeah, for sure.
And I just think it's so funny. I know I say this all the time, but when grown men act like little children, like instead of picking up the phone and calling your friend or former boss or whoever it is, that they have to pull the, hey, will you call Terry for me?
Yeah, exactly.
Like,
that's
come
not
on.
true.
Is that what you guys do if you had a fight?
Oh, totally. I'll send text messages. I won't call you back.
No, we'll send the occasional meme. Yeah. You know?
You alive, bro? Yeah.
Chris Kanyon is someone that we don't hear about a lot.
Bang.
And for good reason, or just because it ended in tragedy and maybe now there's not much to touch on?
I mean, it depends on what scenario. I think he would. I mean, it's funny because even on 83 Weeks, we don't really talk to him that much when he was more of a WCW fixture.
Yeah.
It just he kind of came and went in WWF. Like he was just there for like a second. Yes, he was kind of there in the invasion for like a month. If anything, he was a U.S. champion and the WWF champion at the same time, right there during the invasion. And I always thought the world of Chris Kanyon. I thought he was amazing, and for whatever reason, they couldn't find anything with him. I always think it's weird how. Like it's essentially you got released because creative has nothing for you. How big of an oxymoron is that? the creative team, their team is to create, has nothing for you. Does that fall on the talent, or does that fall on the creative team?
Well, they also want you to believe that you're in charge of your own destiny
No,
there.
of course.
And you can pitch things and you'll be heard and those things will be considered.
Yeah.
And who knows how true that is?
Just don't call yourself the creative team. And it's like, oh, creative's got nothing for you. Well, then how creative are they?
Oh, that's hot take.
I'm just saying, like,
Very
it's just
true.
weird. Like, and especially with Kanyon, that guy was so. I mean, he was called the innovator of offense for a reason. Like, that guy was just crazy good. So I think it's a big shame that he was never utilized. And I know Kanyon kind of went into, maybe there was some underlying effect on why he wasn't really used.
Yeah.
I won't get into that, but like, I mean, if that's the case, that's really sad. I'd like to think that's not the case, but you know, we'll never know.
Yeah, I'm growing up, going to my neighbor's house watching WW Saturday Night, every once in a while. I like the Champagne era. I loved him doing Kanyon cutters off screen. That was pretty fun.
I think it was amazing as Mortis.
Yeah,
I thought Mortis was the bomb.
Mortis was pretty cool too, but I feel like there's a lot of guys who have that kind of talent that just tends to disappear.
And it's I hate, and again, maybe this is going to be a one-time thing. Like, even when Pritchard always says like, oh, well, he didn't really have the best mic skills. Oh, I'm sorry, neither did Chris Benoit, but he did really good for himself.
But he always
makes this excuse. And remember, I love the show. I think this show is amazing, but like, he always makes some excuse like, oh, well, this person didn't have mic skills. Oh, he didn't have the best look. Like, all these excuses, but it worked for a lot of other people.
Yeah.
Like, no, like, just be honest. Like, why wasn't Chris Kanyon more used?
Yeah.
Give us the real reason. Don't give us like, oh, he didn't have the best mic skills. Okay. Like, a lot of other people didn't either, but look at how they turned out.
I feel like
You are saucy today.
I'm just saying.
I feel like if you're a general manager or whatever the position is of a roster, there's only so many people a person can have the bandwidth to think of. You'll be great here, and because of that, everyone who falls out of that role are kind of like, I don't know what to do with you, bro.
And it's a different time back
like
then
out of
too.
sight, out of mind.
Different
Yeah.
time back then too, because I always talk about this too. Nobody gets released these days. Like, nobody. They hire everyone. Back then, there was like Black Friday was like a yearly occurrence on when they, the spring cleaning releases. Nowadays it's like it's just a different time. Maybe it's just who knows what could have been, but I mean, if it was today, I like to think that they would have given somebody like a Kanyon more of an opportunity.
And there's no one in this room who ever got released, and that is the dang truth. Let's talk Stacy, Lita, and Trish. Playboy wants them. They're not giving into it. I like how Bruce made this little, Lita had done some kind of stuff, but she didn't want to do this. If you all haven't read Lita's book, I suggest that that you do so because it's great.
It's a great book.
Yeah.
It's a really, really good book.
Oh yeah. I haven't read.
Flobo, there's your reading assignment
Wrestling book club right
for next week. And I love that we get a chance to talk about Bischoff on this show instead, because Conrad brought it up. Bischoff pointed out to Stacy Keibler, what would your dad think about Playboy? And so, thus, she turned it down. Can you imagine that maybe things would have been different for Stacy Keibler in her career if she had done that?
Yeah, maybe if she would have done Playboy, she would have got to go out with George Clooney.
That's a good point. You're right. She did okay for herself. She's also, married rich and doesn't have to work now. So
Yeah, Playboy is one of those things, and it is weird because I'm a guy, so I'm not going to be on the cover of Playboy myself. But it's one of those things where you've seen both sides. You've seen someone on the cover of Playboy and move on to bigger and better things, but you also seen those who had like the stunt casting and become the cover of Playboy, and it kind of go into obscurity. And I can tell if I was Trish, I would say no because the risk was way better to not do it than to do it. But you see, like, Sable did it or Tori Wilson did it and doing covers. I mean, it was kind of like, okay, there's a lot more upside for Sable, I would think.
Yeah.
A lot more upside for Tori Wilson to do it. I think so.
I disagree. I think there's a lot more upside for them to do it. Like, I mean, I can't even think of a scenario where people, like, there was a downside for somebody who posed for Playboy.
You mean
the
wrestling,
stigma
or?
was minimized back then.
But even
We
like
have
for
to
other
remember it's
people,
different.
like Carmen Electra, Pamela Anderson, Jenny McCarthy, like they all had pretty good careers for whatever it is that they wanted to do. Like maybe not the actress
Olivia Munn did it and
but,
kept her clothes on. That was kind of a different thing.
Yeah, but even like Kelly Monaco, was that the one that won
Yes.
Dancing with the second place thing?
Yeah.
She did pretty good for whatever it is that she wanted to do, And especially back then, it's like, if you look at people like Sable in China, they left WWE because of whatever things that issues they had.
Sure.
Had they would have maybe, still maybe had a good attitude, like everybody said they didn't have, maybe it would have done a lot better. Like, Tori Wilson or even like a Candice Michelle.
Christy Hemme posed the cover too. Christy Hemme?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, for sure. We're talking about
And you know
Hall of
what?
Famers, and
I
gotta-
guarantee
Are
you
they
she's
Christy?
very
I'm like,
glad
oh, wait,
that she
what?
has those pictures now that she's had 8 babies or whatever. I'm sure she's very happy to have that hang on the wall.
That's your mom right there.
Just saying. Okay, this all kind of leads to also before we talk about the pay-per-view, we have to talk about this new style of wrestling supposedly that WWE is pushing. This isn't the first we've heard of it. Of course, the intention is sort of to be a little safer, work safer, but it is essentially a slower style with more selling. Can you guys remember this time, being such rabid fans, did you notice anything changing about the style?
Nope.
Really?
No, I didn't notice at all.
You're such a little
I think
smart. I know you were a
I
little
really didn't
smart ass
notice.
at that age,
I
George
didn't notice.
Ramosa.
I really didn't notice.
So I felt like the slowing down and selling is important, but it gets bundled in with it's the PG era, it's got watered down because the Attitude Era, you had Shane McMahon doing the 40-foot jumps off the Titantron and Superstructure, and that didn't happen as much. But there was a transition, at least for me, as I got older. Then I was like still a teenager-ish there, trying to find other things about the craft that I enjoyed.
Yeah.
But I got into it seeing the hardcore matches that went on for hours and hours of jacked and metal and just Crash Holly going through slides and things like that. But I wasn't there anymore, right? So I can see that being a noted change with the branding of the E and then making sure things are safer.
I didn't notice just because I always thought that they were more about the characters anyway. Because this was during a time where TNA and Ring of Honor were kind of picking up some steam, and they were doing that fast-paced style. And I always thought that WWE they kind of moved away from that. So that's why I didn't never even notice them even slowing down, because I thought it was slow enough to begin with.
Okay, if you thought it was slow to begin with, sure.
Yeah, I didn't. That's why I didn't notice a difference.
Oh, yeah.
Well, we do get one more. We have to mention this Brutus the Barber Beefcake story thing, because we're just getting rolling on this show. We're maybe 3-4 episodes in now, and we wanted to sort of get our footing before we started inviting guests to call in. And I really wanted to reach out to Brutus and ask him to call in and tell the story, but I don't know that that's how we want to kick off our something to wrestle after guest spots here. So maybe if I get another opportunity with Brutus someday in the future, I'm definitely going to ask him about that, because I'm sure he would just love to chat about getting caught with coke and everyone thinking it's anthrax. I mean,
Which was more embarrassing.
you can't make that
That's
shit up.
crazy.
Yeah.
That's not anthrax. That's coke. Trust me. That's
Cool, right?
All right, guys, let's go to 2004, almost exactly 15 years ago to the day, to this sold-out pay-per-view, which was a wild success monetarily, made tons of money. Everybody is sort of salivating to see the main event, Eddie Guerrero. He had this promo on SmackDown before this. Does that stand out in your minds, this specific promo?
yeah.
Yeah. I would say that was the reestablishment of Eddie. And we talked about this in another episode, because they were doing the whole thing with Chavo and Chavo Classic. No, I think he was still Chavo Senior at the time. And it was okay, it's great. You could tell it was kind of towards the end, but we primed Eddie. We saw the crowd response. Here is really his story. Here is someone you can describe Eddie Guerrero to someone who didn't know wrestling. Why should I tune into this guy?
Yeah.
Because of the things he was challenged and how he overcome those obstacles. So that to me was them saying, you are a star in waiting.
Mm-hmm. Do you guys agree with Bruce? That was Eddie's best promo ever?
It's from the
Yeah,
heart.
one of his best, yeah. I just think it's so okay. So hear me out, all right?
Okay.
Hot
Yeah, little
take.
scenario. Yeah, no, hot take, but we'll see. So he hit rock bottom, right? He got fired. He lost out his wife. He lost his kids. He was a drunk, DUI, all these bad things, right? Had he would have never gone through that, I always wondered if he'd be in that scenario in the main event scene in 2004, because you get released and then you get hired back, and then all eyes are on you, making sure you don't mess up again, making sure that you're on your toes. Okay. And I really think because all eyes were on him, they were watching him with binoculars, they got to really see how good Eddie Guerrero was, as opposed to, let's say, he never went through that. One, the storyline wouldn't have been there as far as being an addict. Yeah. Two, maybe he just would have been that, run-of-the-mill coasting. Maybe that's where they saw him as, just like a mid-carder, because they were like, oh, yeah, it's Eddie. We know he's going to put on a good match, as opposed to, wow, now that we're watching Eddie, he really is that good. Again, we'll never know. I like to think that he would have been a main event regardless. That's the whole Austin, if the curtain call never happened, what Austin would have been, because he never would have had the promo. We'll just never know. Yeah. I like to think that some of these guys are so good that no matter what, they would have ended up being a main event status. I just think that's crazy how life turns out sometimes, where it's like, if that would have never happened, then this would have never happened.
Well, Bruce himself sort of seemed to kind of repeat that sentiment, and he thought that that was Eddie's biggest and best selling point. And the reason why he was so popular and was able to get over with everyone was because he was honest about what he'd been through before.
But just imagine if he never did. Let's imagine he was like a clean cut guy, you know? Like, who knows?
Yeah,
We'll never know.
I guess, you know, taking it to the modern times, when they released Jinder Mahal, for example, and they brought him back and they gave him the championship, it was very similar in that they were looking at him and seeing how he's improved, but he didn't quite have the same story as well. I don't think I never connected as much with the fan. Not to compare Jinder Mahal with Eddie Guerrero, but you know what I'm saying. I feel like there wasn't a connection as much there.
I mean, I'll have more to say when we cover the actual match, but yeah, I mean, I just think that's like crazy how so many things happen in real life that, like, if that never happened, then who knows what would have happened instead.
Yeah.
I was on the bus when Jinder got that call from Vince, by the way. At Mania that day that he was going to win. It was the whole thing.
Oh, nice.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, that's how that
Well,
started.
little piece of history there for you. Let's talk about the history of this opening tag match. Bruce is really not into women and men wrestling each other. Talked about it last week with China.
I agree. I think there's a space for that in wrestling, but like in this pay-per-view specifically, I was not a fan. Like, I know we're jumping the gun a bit, but in these two intergender like instances, I was kind of like a bad taste in my mouth.
I think it was just more Shaniqua. Because she was kind of like a cough in the history
blaming
of pro wrestling.
Shaniqua?
I'm blaming Shaniqua.
Okay.
Because especially like I was like a year after Tough Enough too.
Yeah.
Where it's like everybody thought okay, they never announced that the winners of the Tough Enough are going to be a man or not going to be a man and a woman. Everybody thought it's going to be one man, it's going to be one woman. So it's like for like everybody to kind of like see that happening. It's like everybody already kind of had a. Like they give Michael Cole bad rap, which I'll go into a little bit at the end of the show. Like they saw Linda Miles, it's like, oh well, she won Tough Enough when she wasn't supposed to, and I feel like that's though she always had that negative stigma when it came to wrestling in general.
There's also a dominatrix named Shaniqua, but that's another issue altogether.
Well, it worked according to Bruce in the boyfriend-girlfriend match between Jamie Noble and Nydia.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, okay,
Yeah.
Jamie Noble is not a guy we hear about a lot, except for that one time when he got stabbed at his own trailer park or whatever. Not a guy who's on the radar a whole lot anymore these days, but he is behind the scenes working hard, and we know that he's been detrimental in some storylines of the past few years. But to really hear Bruce put him over as a guy who's so smart with in-ring psychology and storytelling, did you guys know that about Jamie Noble? Like, if you're thinking about someone I want to put my match together, I'd go to Jamie Noble.
Absolutely
I know that
not.
now.
Yeah, I know that now. Absolutely not.
Maybe like in the last 2 years or so, but yeah, back then I would have never realized how good he was.
Up until about the same time, I best know Jamie Noble for that same promo they would run about Sheamus when he goes, "I ended careers," and then when you like beat Noble and he had to retire. So like, I didn't have much there as a footnote there, but like I mean, seeing it now, seeing the match and rewatching it, yeah, you can definitely tell there was a story there, and it was made something better than what that was on paper, right? Wear this hood and feel around for a couple bits. But I hated the finish, but that's just that's my hot take.
We will take it. We will take your hot take. Well, they sort of brushed over a lot of these beginning matches, said, oh, the APA match, yeah, that was fun. We were starting to split them up. It sometimes is annoying to me when they're starting to set up a tag team breaking up. But the way that it was done with APA and even sort of the little subtleties, the nuances in this match, I guess Bruce has also sometimes said that things are too subtle. No, I'm sorry, that's Bischoff. Says things can be too subtle. What did you think about this APA kind of teasing the breakup at the end of this?
I mean, we should have kind of saw it because, I mean, JBO, like in 2000 and 2003, he was out with an injury for like a good amount of time.
Yeah.
When he came back from injury, he came back with a short hair, clean shaven. Because before that, he had the long hair, black goatee. You know, it's like he comes back like, wait, that's JBL. That's
Should
Bradshaw.
shine black. It wasn't even
so,
natural black.
So we should have saw it coming. We should have saw it coming. Like, are they going to do a gimmick change? I would have never have thought that would have been he would have been whatever he ended up becoming. Yeah. But you know, I mean, in hindsight, I guess we can't really fault them for the breakup. Even though at the time I was like, they're breaking up APA. Like, I love APA.
Yeah. Again, seeing it now, and I was a big JBL fan during the mid-2000s, it was fine. But I remember when they did turn, it was like, really? Like, the heart and soul is being ripped apart because you need those bruisers that could just come down and be your faces or heels depending on the night, just beat up people or whatever. And, yeah, it's kind of the beginning of the end there.
Well, we also get this, according to Bruce, effing awesome cruiserweight match. And he points out that the WCW cruiserweights definitely push the crash style. And they're trying to, I'm not even going to finish because I can tell that you have something to say about this. Go, George
Can I say the
Hermosa.
P word?
Sure.
This pissed me off so
Okay,
much.
oh,
Because
here we go.
okay, again, I love Pritchard. I think he's awesome, but like when he says things like this, okay, you're clearly a shill. Okay, because like, yeah, of course, if you have Rey Mysterio and Chavo Guerrero in a match like this, it's gonna be awesome. But when you're not Rey Mysterio and Chavo Guerrero, you kind of have to do the crash out to get noticed because that's what Rey did in 96, 97. So it's easy to say like, well, in WWF it's like this, but in WCW that's the wrong way to do it. Yeah, when you're not Rey Mysterio, it's like, yeah, it's easy to say that when you're Rey Mysterio in the match. You know, when you're established, when you're developed, when you have a good 10, 15 years in the business, when you're growing up, like it's easy to say that. So it's like for him to crap on WCW cruiserweights, I mean that's like, dude, like it's very clear that you're just a WWE shill.
Yeah, it was. I'm not doesn't agree with you 100%. There's a little tense, but I do felt like again, someone who was more WWF centric, growing up, going into WCW. There was a lot of talent there, but a lot of difficult for me to tell them apart. Like my thing when it comes to a character is can I describe that character to somebody else who can't see the show? And a lot of those guys kind of run together. But there is a bit of that thing to your point where if you're getting established and you're on the stage but no one knows where you are, you can't come out there and do rest holes and be like, where's my t-shirt deal? Like it's you gotta do something to be noticed, whether it's like weird jackets or whether it's special moves or even having a cool valet or something to stick out. So
That's a good point, guys. And thank you for bearing your heart and soul there, G. Herm. All right, we get a lot of talk about the Chavo Sr., the whole family, Bruce's relationship with them. I just love to hear about the real stuff with these guys. You know, like they were really friends. He calls them family and brothers. That's pretty special.
yeah.
I don't know. I wonder if the talent nowadays would say the same thing. Like, I wonder if they feel the same way about the people that they work with every day.
You mean like talent or like more management?
Well, really, I mean, anyone who's working behind the scenes. Do people feel they can trust? Do they feel that they are close to people? You know, now there's two brands and maybe everyone doesn't see each other all the time. I don't know that you hear about these kind of close-knit relationships as much nowadays.
We don't, but we didn't hear about that back then either. So I think it mostly comes out maybe down the road. Because like I'm even now like, who's somebody that would be in that Pritchard role that's kind of like there with, because it's a different time now. Now it's like 30 people in a meeting as opposed to back then when maybe it was like a handful, you know?
Yeah.
And obviously Pritchard kind of being from that Houston area and growing up in Houston wrestling, like he had the opportunity to get close with the Guerreros because obviously that Houston connection or that Texas connection. I don't know.
Yeah, the business has changed quite a bit. I think there's always gonna be a camaraderie. It's almost like civilians versus not being in it. But I again, I'm not even inside. But
like I think it's one of those where it's like maybe you take for granted in some ways because like, you know, when you're there, it's like, oh hey, I just saw you a couple of days ago. But like let's say if you see each other in the airport randomly, it's like, oh hey, you know, like, you'll make it a point to be like, hey, what's up? How are you? You know?
Yeah. Well, I think maybe any other night of the week, any other pay-per-view, this match would have been the main event. John Cena versus Kurt Angle and The Big Show for this WrestleMania spot. Bruce says this just made sense. It was logical storytelling. He liked Cena's little rap there. Did you guys look at this match any differently nowadays, seeing it back?
I did. He tapped out. I forgot he tapped out. It's been so long since Cena tapped out. I was like, oh yeah.
Which is kind of a big deal.
It's kind of a big deal. Like, you know, triple threats, you always have that one spoiler person in there. You think, will they do it? Will they not? And you can tell that Cena had charisma that was oozing down, like left his pores and all that stuff. And the fans were into him. And even though his rhymes weren't the greatest, but it was definitely edgy for the time.
I thought he was awesome.
It's just very, very slow. You know, it's like, come on.
Oh, it's wrestling. You have to make sure that everybody can, you know, catch up.
All right, you don't want to do our truth. What's up?
Yeah.
I love that. Okay. It is time. Oh, God. I almost just said, are you guys ready for the main event of the night? Yeah.
Cow Palace.
All right, there. We went full WWE for you. Right. You guys are ready? Let's talk about the heavyweight championship match. This is, of course, between Eddie Guerrero and Brock Lesnar. Brock is on his way out at this time. He's going to fly out on his own plane that WWE helped pay for, which Bruce kind of justified and made sense. But this, obviously, a huge win for Eddie, duh. But the whole thing just meant a lot. What was it about? Was there anything that Bruce said that surprised you or was new or was interesting, or is this just an homage?
I was surprised how, according to him, how much he supported Eddie, right?
Yeah.
I thought that he was like finally off with him, but he was like, no, I was pushing for him, and you really can't call him the Mexican this, he's a star, which is weird because an hour earlier he called him the Mexican Star Michaels. So I didn't know what the terminology
good
was.
catch.
So I was like, all right, whatever, bro. But that's what I learned the most from that match, that he was a big fan. So.
I know going back, and I was thinking about it, where was I when that happened? This is pre-network. This is 2004. This is almost 10 years to the date before the network. So I did not watch this pay-per-view live. Did you watch it live?
No, I didn't.
I didn't watch it live, so I would always go, later that night, see one. I'm not gonna lie. I had zero, I had no, I did not think he was gonna win.
Yeah.
Didn't think he was going to win at all. Like, zero chance, right? I was like, oh, it's going to be Goldberg and Brock for the title at WrestleMania, et cetera, or Goldberg or Brock, Kurt, whoever, Yeah. So, I'm looking down, reading. Okay, so this person, what? Eddie won? No way! That's odd. I did not think at all he was gonna win.
You gotta realize this is the days before Brock skipped leg day. He was a stud. There was no chance.
And
of
this was
winning.
before anybody knew that he was leaving.
Right.
This wasn't we heard he's leaving. I don't know who's gonna drop the belt yet. I had no idea. I thought he was a future star for the next 5, 6, or 16 years.
Yeah, for sure.
I had no idea he was gonna win. So for me to see that he won, and then eventually for me to watch it back, because I remember buying the No Way Out 2004 DVD with Eddie on the cover, and I saw this match and it was just the best.
Do you see a different Brock there than you do?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
What's
he wrestled he wasn't. Oh. No. I mean, he wrestles now, but he's not the MMA guy. Turned wrestler. He was a pro wrestler back then, so still makes for great matches. But he was just he did everything back then. He did everything in the book and everything.
Brock was younger. He emoted a little bit more, so you know what he was feeling psychology wise, and he didn't have a mouthpiece as much as he does Paul Heyman now. So he definitely had to do most of his heavy lifting. But the Eddie side, the match was great, but I didn't realize how much of a star he was until watching his entrance again now. Having the crowd with them, the low rider coming out, doing a little shimmy shake. It was this was a star in the making if he wasn't a star already, and that to me was great. And those two clashed pretty well because Brock sold for Eddie and Eddie sold for Brock, and it felt like he was going to win, and it turns out that Eddie did. So.
Bruce points out that Brock is maybe even better when working with a smaller guy.
I think
you could
so.
say that still to this day.
I would rather watch Brock versus Eddie or AJ or Daniel Bryan or Finn Balor than watching Brock versus Braun Strowman or Big Show or Kane or whatever. It's no disrespect to any of those guys, but I just think that those make for much better matches for both guys.
Sure, because to make that opponent believable, there has to be an added story element. You can't just be you're two beasts. I remember when Balor took on Brock, the whole the stomach injury thing was added into it, which made it more entertaining for me to watch. But you see Brock sell, which is something you don't usually see in these giant, massive, big titan behemoth matches.
Yeah. And it apparently brought a tear to everyone's eye backstage. Did Bruce say Vince was even crying? I think said he was crying. Everybody's crying.
And honestly, I'm not gonna lie. Even watching it now as well, but just watching it back then, even before he passed away, it brought a tear to my eye. It was really emotional. His mom was crying in the front row. His brother was there, and obviously Chavo and Chavo Guerrero Jr. were backstage. They were heels, so they didn't come out to celebrate them and whatnot. But they were happy. And I was kind of going over Eddie's book. He was saying that him and Chavo Sr. never had the best relationship, that he was always kind of looking for his older brother for approval to make sure that that he's one of them, one of the boys. So knowing that Eddie was able to get his older brother's approval after all those years also meant a lot to him too.
Yeah, definitely. It was a nice time for that. But then you didn't think it was going to happen for sure, but it was a No Way Out, which is almost, that February pay-per-view was almost notorious for nothing.
Exactly.
It was kind of nothing against Eddie, but it was whatever. You can skip that one. Oh, you can't? Oh, snap.
And especially the crowd reaction, hearing about it too, where I guess it was maybe 75% sold out the day of, and then by the show starting, it was sold out.
Yes.
Most of them from a lot of Mexican American population kind of coming in just to see Eddie.
That one entrance, one entrance in the entire arena.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that covers No Way Out 2004.
Oh, can I say one more thing? Sorry,
Yeah, go
I
ahead.
totally just interrupted you.
No, I should have asked
and
you.
just because we're talking about the whole show in general, and I don't care what anybody says. Everybody gives slack on Michael Cole. And if anybody,
someone in the chat literally just said one of Michael Cole's best commentary moments.
You stole my mojo. Because I've been praising Michael Cole for a while, and again, everybody's gonna say, "Well, it's not. It's because he didn't have Vince in his ears." So you're saying, so you're acknowledging that he's really, really good. You know what I mean?
According to Cole, he's never not had Vince in his ear.
Well, I mean, like in general, like sometimes he had, when they're overseas or for the Mania Classic, but like in this case scenario, Vince or not, I think this is one of Michael Cole's finest performances. Just that whole like last 3 minutes of like Goldberg coming in and Brock kicking out, and I like the fact that even though Goldberg came in and speared Brock, that's not how Eddie won. Brock still had a chance to kick out and did his move and whatnot. So but the whole structure of it, Guerrero and Michael Cole, one of his best performances that he's ever had for the whole show, more so the main event.
All right, anytime we can take time out and praise Michael Cole, just love it. And now it is time for what we're gonna call something to wrestle with today. This is where we take one of the issues that they brought up during the show and we talk about how it pertains to pro wrestling. And this time we just have a couple minutes left, so we'll keep this short. But Bruce brought up at one point with OVW and this idea that wrestlers know there are some schools that have the big boy's eyes, or however he put it. Nowadays, you can go to a lot of wrestling schools, and a lot of veterans have schools, but there are some where people get pulled from and get seen for tryouts and things like that. Jerry Briscoe is always out talking to people. Is there an ethical issue with something like that? George, you are a wrestler in training, and you do train at Brian Kendrick's school. I hope you don't mind me revealing that. Okay. So what do you think about the ethics of this idea that, some schools are basically almost sort of sanctioned by WWE unofficially?
I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It's just show business. It's just the way it is. It's just the same reason why maybe somebody may get hired for their looks alone. Welcome to the wrestling business.
Yeah.
Okay.
As long as it's not say like guaranteed, pay me this fee, I'll get you a talk with an interview with McMahon. I think it's pretty much fine. But I will say this, stepping back to it, I think that's the difference between great promotions like the WWE and ones that are on that level that failed. Like creating and crafting a way to funnel in new talent, I think is super important. Whether it's their own by NXT or working relationships with other promotions, it's kind of like necessary because you can't sign all your superstars and waste budget. You gotta have some homegrown talent as well. So
yes,
I
that
always
is
said
just
that
the
too.
kind of succinct, opinion-based conversation that I thought we would have about that. Go ahead.
No, I agree. I think for every Owens and Sami Zayn and Ricochet you may have, you need a Roman Reigns and on the roster. You need a Braun Strowman on the roster to how you can't have just nothing but indie guys, but you also can't have a lot of homegrown guys. It's all about balance. You have to find a fine balance, and even NXT where you look at everybody that they signed: Keith Lee, Ricochet, Adam Cole, Matt Riddle. The best guy there is Velveteen Dream. Yeah, you know what I mean. And he's as homegrown as it gets.
Yeah, he's 23.
Yeah, there are people who come to tryouts having never stepped in a wrestling ring before, and some of them are on the main roster. There are some that have been watching since infancy and have been training since they were teenagers who are there as well.
Yeah.
Wow, that was so deep, guys. More thoughts from @Christy Reports. If they want to hit you guys up and get your thoughts on other things, where would our great fans do that at, boys?
Well, I am at FlowBoys on Twitter, at FlowBito on Instagram, and at FlowBito.com. That's FLOBITO.com.
All right.
Regardless of what I've said, I'm really a fan of the show. I think it's a great show. It just, there are some things where it's like, dude, that's total BS, Bruce. I get what you're doing. You're still awesome, though. Nice meeting you, by the way, in LA. G Hermosa, GHERMOZA. Twitter, Instagram, all the above. This Friday, Roasting Pro Wrestling this Friday at the Burbank Moose Lodge. Or you can watch it on Twitch or YouTube a week later.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to come live and hang out with you.
Yeah, you should.
And you guys can always hit me up at Christy Reports. Remember, we also do After 83 Weeks, where we have a special Q&A every single week with Eric Bischoff. You can find that on the 83 Weeks channel. Make sure you hit subscribe, give us a little thumbs up, and we will see you next week to talk Undertaker 04 to 06. It's going to be good. See you then.
Our founder, Keven Undergaro, and me, Maria Menounos, would like to thank you for tuning in to AfterBuzz TV. Remember, we're not just the first, we're the biggest in the world, and we're the only destination for all your favorite TV shows. Whatever you crave, we've got it. So go to AfterBuzzTV.com and check out our lineup. Buzz you later.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.